Welcome to Origin Stories. My guest this week is Dave Rouse, the CEO of Click, and a serial entrepreneur, I suppose is a good way of describing you. Dave, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Albeit a slightly husky voice today. Apologies for that.
All good. I love your background, and that explains a lot about what Click does. Your current venture, Click, is a carbon offsetting company dedicated to creating a greener planet, by providing solutions to businesses and consumers and individuals. We'll chat in more detail later on about Click and the incredibly important and valuable work that you guys are doing. But for to start, I want to focus on your journey to, I suppose, to becoming an environmental entrepreneur, if you don't mind that tag.
Sure.
You didn't set out to save the planet, right? And initially, your dream was to save lives. Is that correct?
Originally, yeah, I started off at med school. Was the first thing I did after school, wanting to be a pediatrician. But I had a few issues with my mental health and coping with deaths and things. I was doing some of the, I guess you would call it internship work, where I would study alongside pediatricians in the real world, and that real world experience, I guess I just wasn't mature enough to handle it when I was 18 years old. So I jumped across to engineering at that point, which is a shame, because I do love medicine, and I think I would have done okay at it. But life takes you on different journeys for different reasons.
Absolutely.
So here we are now, trying to save the planet.
Yeah. Why engineering, Dave? What was the engineering interest?
I guess most boys love playing with Lego and figuring out how things work and trying to build things and understand. I was quite science-based or quite attracted to science, and engineering was just a part of that science that helped me understand the world around me, that also seemed to have practical aspects that would lead into potential careers. Not that I ever pursued engineering as a career.
Yeah, you studied engineering and then got into the aviation industry. Is that correct?
I did my pilot's license while I was at med school, and it was originally just going to be a hobby, but I got addicted to it. And ended up doing some work as a pilot for a little while. But working as a pilot was quite different to actually just flying for fun. You became a lot less pilot and a lot more bus driver. Right. And, I just loved general aviation, small planes, having no automation. But I guess sitting in the cockpit for long periods of time, my mind got quite bored and wanted other challenges. So I found business was really appealing, because I could be doing a few different things at the same time.
Very good. One of your early ventures was exporting mussels to Korea, right? Those mussels must have had a significant carbon footprint, did they?
Actually, I haven't thought about the carbon footprint of them, but certainly they do carry an environmental footprint, and shipping them to Korea carries quite a carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest environmental hazard is high nitrogen loadings from mussel poo that sits on the beds. Anything in too great in doses potentially hazardous. It's a bit like monoculture pine,
Right. So at what stage of your entrepreneurial kind of journey did you become aware of I suppose, the environmental impact of businesses like mussels, and start thinking about, I suppose, your impact on the planet?
Well, carbon dioxide, I never thought of as a contaminant. I never thought of too much of a good thing. I thought this is what trees need to survive. This is what they breathe in and turn into carbon to grow. So I never realized until, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that CO2 was such a problem. It should have been obvious, but I guess I was so caught up in other problems, environmental problems, particularly the wider pollution. So contaminants. I was involved in smoky vehicle campaigns in my early days.
Yeah.
And then anti-plastic or anti-single-use plastic campaigns. And that's I even got as far as I started a charity or co-founded one with some others called Sea Cleaners to educate on single-use plastics and remove them out of the environment. So I grew up in the bush. We didn't have Glad Wrap on our lunches. We didn't have any of, we didn't have lollies and things. We didn't have plastic straws. Everything we had was pretty much locally sourced. And we had to take rubbish and recycling a long way away. So we didn't have rubbish collection. So we tried not to produce rubbish because it was just a hassle, and we're aware of having to deal with it at the tail end. Whereas modern society, we're so used to putting it in the bin and putting it out for the rubbish collection. We just don't think about the consequences of that. That goes somewhere and has to be dealt with and probably doesn't break down.
Yeah. So when you say you grew up in the bush, where was that, and what did your parents do?
Out in the Waitakaris, which is west of Auckland, on the way to a beautiful black sand beach called Piha. My mum was a naturopath, and so pretty in tune with the land around her. My dad was more on the business side. He was a merchant banker. So he kind of disappeared to work early in the mornings and worked hard and was more the entrepreneur.
Yeah. And you obviously throughout your 20s and into your 30s started and sold and exited a number of different businesses. Do you want to talk me through just some of those and just give me a sense of kind of your entrepreneurial kind of progression?
Yeah, very few of them I started. There were 2 or 3, but the majority of the time, as part of engineering and piloting, I got into auditing as well. Because it was helpful for job opportunities, and through that I spotted common threads with businesses that were performing well and businesses that weren't, as far as systems and processes went. So I guess I started spotting opportunities in businesses that were for sale that were not taking any of these normal process steps, and therefore were leaving a lot of profit on the table, were wasting a lot. And that carries an environmental footprint as well as a big dent on their potential. So you could pick businesses up that were underperforming for a fraction of their true value, particularly if a seller was motivated to sell. They might have built a business around them and then had a health issue, or they might have found love overseas and just wanted to leave everything behind, and without them the business has come crumbling down. So you're picking up the pieces of a former glory, and you're able to get in and restructure and put it back together in a way that's built around lean processes, eliminating wastage, human resource wastage as well as materials wastage, and you can end up with what I call triple bottom line profitability, which is good environmental footprint, good social outcomes, as well as really healthy profit improvements.
Cool. So you cashed in on some of those entrepreneurial plays, from what I understand. I mean, you could have taken the easy road and maybe lived a good life out in Titirangi, right? What prompted you to get stuck into a venture like Carbon Click?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I'd lost some money in a bad investment. Okay. And I just decided with the balance, I would dedicate most of my time to charity, invest or donate money rather than lose money. And I had enough, I was set up. So I thought I might as well pay for my sins of the past and do something good for the planet, do something good for the world. And that's where Sea Cleaners came on. And I also started angel investing and helping back other founders to see their ideas through to hopefully success, usually failure, but help them learn those lessons along the way that sets them up for the next opportunity. Yeah. And I found that really rewarding. If I was going to be losing money, I'd far rather that it was for a really good cause or donating it rather than trying to keep doing businesses in a way that I was trying to do it more hands-off. Okay. So lots of learnings along the way. Carbon Click was one of those investments that I fell in love with. I fell in love with the founders, the vision that they had, they were looking to quit their jobs with Air New Zealand, and join a startup accelerator. So I sort of followed that through to the end and wanted to back these guys. And then they came back to me and said, look, would you consider actually founding it with us, registering the company and going through all that process, and perhaps leading the helm, because, you know, one of them was like an Einstein amazing product guy, and one of them was an amazing tech guy, but neither of them had been in business before or knew the commercial world. So I made the decision. I thought, you know, this is one opportunity you don't get often in life, to have a serious impact with my time, as well as financial investment. So I kind of put all my eggs in that basket and dedicated myself to it. And it's brought me a lot of roller coaster ride that I forgot how hard business was, particularly startup. It was a welcome reminder. And then we started performing ahead of projections, which was great. And then COVID hit, which wiped out our airline airport market. And it was kind of like starting a startup a second time a year later, but with very little cash runway left to leverage the next investment round. So lots of learnings. But we've got through. We've got to a good position now where we're up on a solid path.
I want to get back to the impact of COVID, obviously, but for people who don't understand carbon offsetting, and it may be quite vague to some people still, can you explain how Carbon Click works? Obviously, you've got options for businesses and individuals, for consumers, right? Let's start with the options for business, Dave.
Yeah, well, the best example that people would be familiar with is when you're booking a flight, or if you remember when you used to book a flight, you had the option. It was a tick box or a green button that said, would you like to offset this flight? The amount was there. It was calculated in the back end by the platform to say you're flying, say, from Auckland to Sydney. That'll be whatever it is, 25 tons of carbon and maybe $2 or something like that. And all you're doing is clicking to add that to the ticket, and now you're flying. The impact of that flight, or your percentage of that impact of that flight, has been covered by you. So you've got a bit of a happier mindset about doing it. Yeah, there's a few trees planted that are absorbing the carbon that you've just emitted. Yeah. And that's really what offsetting is. There's lots of different ways to offset, but if you think about it at a big picture level, those trees absorb the carbon dioxide. So you're taking up land that could have been earmarked for a road or a building or a beef farm, and you're planting trees on it so that they're pulling all that carbon back out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, very good. And for individuals then, tell me a little bit about how it works for individuals.
Yeah, so for well, just going back a step, for businesses, they could either offset a product and embed it into the product, so it's a carbon neutral product or a carbon offset product. So the consumer sees a badge or something on the side of it and they think that's great. There's no carbon associated with that. So if you're a New Zealand cheese exporter trying to get into the UK market, where they're a bit cautious about carbon footprint, and they see carbon neutral or carbon offset, they think, well, that's great. It's actually got no carbon footprint. And we do have low carbon dairy in New Zealand compared with other places in the world. So we can perform quite well in that space. And the flip side is you can offer customers to offset their carbon. So you might be reducing your impact as much as possible, but there's still some residual impact in buying a pair of shoes online, especially the freight to that customer. So you can offset that or allow your customers to offset it. Cool. For individuals, we've all got a carbon footprint, no matter, even if we reduced everything else to near zero and we were just purely plant-based and not using electricity or anything. I'm not talking on this computer to you that I've purchased. We still breathe out carbon dioxide, and by nature we've still got a footprint. So offsetting allows us to reduce or completely offset that carbon footprint. And if we can find that balance to be neutral citizens, then or at least reduce it down to a level where the planet can cope, then we all do well. So we offer for individuals to subscribe to offset their carbon footprint.
Cool, very good. You talked to me about COVID. How challenging was it? Because I mean, I understand that like 75, 80, 90% of your revenue stream, 90% of your business was with the airlines pre-COVID, correct?
Yeah, and because we'd had so much success in that space, and there was so much movement in there, you know, Greta Thunberg and the flight shaming movements out of the Western Europe, they were fueling this fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so we were well ahead of targets pre-COVID. We'd literally sold and signed up clients before the platform was completed. COVID hit and all of that market cancelled on us. And because we'd put almost all of our eggs in that basket, we had very little plan B.
Right.
So we had to look at what was next on our expansion plans and on our product roadmap, which was e-commerce as a wider sector, not just airlines. So we just had to, you know, we're looking at the noose and thinking, you know, do we consider this all over? Do we pack our bags, go home and apologise to our investors? Or do we try and make something of this, spend a bit more money, burn a bit more of our cash runway, and just see if we can get some traction in the wider e-commerce space and in the other spaces like loyalty and rewards. So we were all working 80-hour weeks for that month from the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown. We were working 80-hour weeks for about a month. The whole team pulled together. They knew, you know, this was pretty make or break kind of month for us because we had not much cash runway left to pay our staff to be able to then get our next round of investment. Fortunately, we also had some Callahan funding and an R&D project sitting on the back burner, so we were able to get most of our tech staff straight away working on our R&D project. And then at least their wages were part covered by Callahan and part covered by wage subsidy, and that reduced a lot of that impact, and we could stretch that runway out to give us as management time to try and figure out other solutions. We got our first plugin out pretty quickly after that. We contracted an agency to build us our Shopify plugin to bolt onto our platform, and that was done offshore pretty quickly for us. So within 3 months we had that going, and soon after that we had, you know, close to 300 or 400 businesses had signed up. So that was a really relieving sign of, you know, despite being in a turbulent COVID world, there were a lot of people in lockdown that were thinking, you know, how that gave them the time to think, how can we do things a little better next time? Mother Nature's obviously having a go at us with COVID, and we've probably ignored a few warning signs. Mother Nature's having a go at us with climate change as well. So there was a bit of a revived movement in the climate change space, driving a lot of consumers to ask their businesses that they buy from to do more, and driving a lot of businesses to do more, either from a leadership perspective because they actually felt like they had the opportunity to do more, or from some of them from a more selfish perspective that they saw the market was demanding it, or they saw an opportunity to cash in on the market that wanted to support more sustainable businesses. So they decided to move in that space. Either way, for us, it's been a really good thing.
Cool. Were there any big wins or key wins along the way in that e-commerce space that convinced you that you were on the right track? Any big kind of names that you can mention that you signed up?
Lots of big names in the e-commerce space. In the New Zealand market, there's, you know, some of our favorite brands, Miss Lolo, which is a famous designer internationally, Click Fitness, and even Karma Cola, you know, Karma drinks. Some really cool people that we worked with in the early days that really helped us on the right track and promoted us well. And but, you know, by month 2, when we started, when we opened the plugin to be able to be downloaded internationally, straight away 60% of our market was the US market. And, you know, we were pretty much an international business at that point.
Do any of the big international players use carbon offsetting? And I'm thinking like the e-commerce giants, like your Amazon and people like that. Or what stage is that at?
Yeah, they've all got various programs at various stages of maturity. Some of them are using cheaper offsets, which may not be as high quality. For example, we just have a no pine policy. We don't support monoculture. I know when I go trout fishing in the areas where it's pine forestry, those rivers have been coated with the pine oil runoff, and there's no fish left in there. There's no aquatic life left in there. We like whole ecosystems and projects with really good social outcomes. So in the wider e-commerce space, there are some good programs starting to come out, but most of them are just a pure offset, which is they've looked for the cheapest option possible.
Yeah. How much of what you do is an education piece, or is the evidence now so overwhelming and so devastating in terms of, where we're going with climate change, that it's become maybe a lot easier?
We shouldn't be an education piece. We should just be there to support the businesses and people that want to do good, that understand this. We're pretty much supporting the highest quality projects, and we're just the bridge that helps to fund them. And people know, if you're aware and you start to ask questions in this space, it's pretty easy to uncover what's a good project and what's not, and they generally start to come towards us. So we've got quite an easy job there. I do find myself trying really hard to resist the urge to have a go at trolls on the internet that have their head in the sand, or they're denying that it's good to, restore our biodiversity. I can't say for sure what the status of climate change is. I just know that if we don't act, and the scientists are right, then we're in real trouble. Yeah. If we do act and the scientists are wrong, then we've restored, biodiversity, ecosystems. My kids get to see real elephants in the future, and so on. Our oceans have better quality marine life, and reefs that I can dive on. I want this planet to be restored, whether or not it's anything to do with carbon dioxide. Right. But it just happens that this is one of the ways of making that happen.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good answer to the naysayers, isn't it? Who I think are thankfully an ever decreasing number, which is good. Apart from the impact on Carbon Click, what impact has the global COVID pandemic had on the climate change movement? Has it had to take a back seat as a result of all the madness that's going on around the world?
Initially, it did. The first 3 weeks of probably that's about the 20th of March to maybe about the 20th of April. Yeah, we saw a marked decrease in search engine terms around this space, and then just looking at Google Analytics and those kind of pointers that we use to start anticipating movement changes. So we were pretty stressed at that time, but it has it basically restored itself to the times when Greta Thunberg was doing her school movement and everyone was trying to understand and make sense of it. So there's certainly been no drop off, and now boards have had time, directors have had time, businesses have had time to anticipate that this is the direction that they're going in. Yeah. So those leaders have now started acting on those demands from consumers and on the information that they've now had time to really digest, because it takes a bit longer to circulate things through boards and chew the fat when you're only meeting monthly versus social media can spread pretty quickly. But that's landed us in a really good position, and any business in a really good position today, with being able to answer the market, being able to do the right thing, and being able to have a serious impact on climate change and the fight to restore our environmental stewardship.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of talk about the pandemic offering a rare opportunity to reinvent the way we do business, and obviously you and most of us will be hoping that that would include the way we consider our carbon footprint, and that businesses will start to be much more aware of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, in terms of when we first met, we met at Climate X, which was a 3-day sprint a couple of years ago to generate new and innovative ways of tackling climate change. Are you still involved with Climate X? Is that still
Well,
happening?
it was cancelled last year because of COVID. I'm hoping it will be run again this year.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed mentoring at Climate X and seeing the new thinking that comes, especially from a fresh eyes approach. And in any business, it's great to get fresh eyes from somebody that knows nothing about the business.
Yeah.
And you had people who were passionate about the environment but knew nothing about the projects they were about to embark on, which were ideas sparked around the room from people that had ideas and knew nothing about how to implement them or do validation on them. So it was really great to see new ingenuity coming to the front and pointing end of solving this problem.
Yeah, right. And I asked you, I think, why you decided to get involved with Climate X when we met a few years ago, and you were very blunt in your answer. You said, "I'm here because I'm scared. What the world is doing and what I'm doing with Carbon Click is not nearly enough. It's 10% of what we need to be doing, if even that." Are you still scared?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm motivated by hope as well as fear, and with it was because I was always about plastic, anti-single-use plastic, and looking at what it was doing to our marine environments in particular. I only recently, like 2-3 years ago, started doing really deep research on climate change, carbon emissions, or really carbon dioxide equivalent gas emissions, and getting into the science behind it, getting into the stats behind it, getting into the trends and the IPCC reports and Paris Article 6. It wasn't till I'd started reading all of those documents about 3 times over that I started to build a pretty clear picture in my mind, which is a scary thing. Once the penny drops, it's hard to unsee what's on our horizon. So I am still scared, and the only thing we can do is act, right? We can't sit here being scared about it. We actually, that's not going to be productive. We actually have to act, all of us.
Yeah. So if a couple of years ago we were doing 10% of what we needed to be doing, what would you estimate the figures at now? Is it more or less? Have we moved in the right direction, or is it just a very, very slow kind of awakening?
No, I think we're certainly doing more now. We're probably doing 15% of what we need to be doing, but that paints a pretty bleak picture in 10 years' time. We need to be doing 100% of what we need to be doing. We've already got a tailwind of environmental forces coming our way that are going to hurt. And even if we stopped emitting and went carbon neutral right now, it would take 10 years for that bow wave to peter out and for the environment to play catch up and start stabilizing. So we have a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot more bad to come. And the quicker that we can reverse that impact, or at least neutralize it, the better.
What's your take, Dave, on the Climate Change Commission targets and report announced just recently, I think at the weekend? What impact do you think they will have on the way we live in New Zealand?
I think it's probably insufficient.
Okay.
15% reduction in beef stock numbers, for example. That's, we do need to paint a better opportunity for farmers and help them out more. We can't just land these figures on them. Some of them are close to the breadline. We have to do more to support them in a transition state, maybe like the UK has done with the Woodland Carbon Code. But I think it's a bit underwhelming, to be honest. We've got a real leadership position. The rest of the world is looking on New Zealand at the moment to show them the way, and we can leverage that. Our exports could be really priced at a premium, if the government took those opportunities and actually doubled down on that opportunity to get in the spotlight even more. But I think they've missed a beat there. Certainly, electrification and all of those of vehicle fleets and that sort of thing, that's a no-brainer. But to me, it's left a lot to be desired. They had the opportunity to move on.
What's the stumbling block, do you think? What's holding them back?
Political correctness, I guess, and also they get bullied around a little bit by big enterprises that they know will create so much pushback. And you look at the negotiations of TY Point, for example. They've got our governments by the short and curlies. And they're holding us to ransom, and I think the government is scared. I love what Australia is doing at the moment with Google. They're not standing up to it, and it's this is the sort of activity that will transform nations into the future, and that's the sort of behaviour that we really need.
Are you politically active, Dave, or are you just focusing on what you can do with Carbon Click? Have you enough?
No. Maybe post Carbon Click in 5 years' time, out of frustration, I may lend a hand or offer my help or roll my sleeves up wherever I can. But certainly, I've got one job right now, which is to help Carbon Click make it easy for people to take action on climate change, especially businesses who we're all looking up to now as a leadership position, because governments are just too slow.
What are your ambitions for Carbon Click? Do you want it to be a global player in 3-5 years time, or sooner than that? What's your big ambition?
Yeah, I mean, we're a global player now. Most of our business is offshore. And we just recently signed up Etihad Airways, who are wanting to boost their carbon offsetting program from what it was to a really significant, impactful one. So in 2 days' time, we announce another airline as well. But most of our business is offshore. What I see in 5 years' time is having a really significant impact and a measurable, tangible impact on restoring this planet's ecosystems, biodiversity, and helping to fight climate change, as well as those social outcomes. But we want to be of a size that it does have a global impact. Every country that we work in, we connect people with good quality projects near to them. So building that reconnection and supporting all of these projects to do well is really important. They're all struggling, and they struggle to pay decent wages and livable wages to people wanting to get into this conservation work. So by bringing the price of carbon up, we're able to highlight those good quality projects, and our clients are willing to pay the extra for the better quality projects. So having that impact and bringing up the standard of carbon offsetting globally is probably one of our big ambitions.
Cool. Do you have to be an optimist to have to work in the climate change industry, would you say?
I think you've probably got to hold a degree of hope. Very close. You've got to be able to see that things are possible. I wouldn't, it's tough, but we can't keep our head in the sand at the same time. We've got a real opportunity here to give it our best shot. All of us have, and all we need to do is accept the opportunity. We're just bringing the horse to the trough, so to speak. Yeah,
absolutely. I like to ask people what superpower or trait or skill that they have above anything else that has helped you on your journey, on your career path to date, Dave. If you had to pick pick one kind of superpower, one trait, what would you go for?
I guess it would probably be the ability to help a team see a problem as a challenge and turn it into something fun, like a rock climbing wall. You know, these brick walls that we hit in businesses can really, you know, we hit them at 1,000,000 miles an hour and it hurts and we think there's no way around it. But, you know, if we can turn that into a fun challenge and say, look, imagine if we could solve this.
Yeah.
And getting all the teams around to burn the midnight oil wherever need be to actually make that their one purpose in life, to solve that challenge that day. That's probably one superpower, I guess, that I would have. I've got a lot of faults as well, though.
Yeah, and as you say, we all have got to have that kind of hope, that optimism, and imagine, you know, a way out of this, if you like. That it's got to be a joint effort. It's got to be a group effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Finally, Dave, we've kind of touched on this with that answer. Your legacy. Obviously, you got involved in Carbon Click to you know, help improve things. What story do you want people to tell about you? You know, in a few years' time, what legacy would you like to leave behind?
Well, I would say I'd love to have made it possible, or shown people that it is possible to take action, and being part of the change helps them to take action. I'd like to be, you know, for all of these carbon offset projects that we support, including new ones that there isn't even measurement systems for, like blue carbon, seaweed sequestration, and so on. I'd like to have been part of that solution that creates that industry.
Very good. Listen, Dave, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, look forward to following Carbon Click's progress over the next few years.
Thanks so much, Rob. I really appreciate your time as well, and apologies for the husky voice once again. I hope you guys could hear me okay.
It was fantastic. Great stuff, Dave. Thanks a lot.